Over the last few weeks, I have become re-obsessed with American Gladiators thanks in no small part to the Netflix and ESPN documentaries that have recently dropped. As someone who is obsessed with stats, I was very interested to hop in and look at the rankings of the Gladiators to see which of them excelled at specific events. Sure, I remember Ice being a studded assault and Nitro being the workhorse of Powerball, but is that just my nostalgia talking? Unfortunately, I soon found out that not only is there no real stat keeping done with American Gladiators, but there's not even a valid ranking of the Gladiators anywhere. Thankfully, most of the series outside of Season 1 is widely available on YouTube, so I spent the last week watching every episode of Season 2, compiling stats and making notes to try and determine which Gladiator posted the best season overall statistically. If you want to see my full stat breakdown, make sure and check out the description below, and keep in mind that these stats are a bit rough. For one, I'm missing things like the Alumni Challenge, but there are also some discrepancies in how points are awarded as you get further into the competition that I chose not to break out for events like Powerball and Atmosphere. I'll get into more detail about that when it comes up, but just know it's there. It's also important to know how I score certain events. For example, if you're playing something like Assault, I'm giving the Gladiator the win for either hitting the contender or having the time stall out. That said, in Joust, I'm only giving points if the Gladiator knocks the contender off. The way I look at it is that we need to consider the Gladiator's goal and if they succeed. So, a draw in Assault is a Gladiator win because they did their job. They stopped the person from making it to the end. But if they draw and hang tough, I'm not giving them points because they didn't complete the goal. Fortunately, Assault is really the only event with some gray area and everything else is pretty straightforward, but do keep that in mind moving forward. If you have any questions or comments about how Season 3 and beyond are going to go, feel free to sound off in the comments. For now, let's get to their rankings, starting with the women. Number 5, Lace. It's hard to do these rankings without any real context, but it definitely seems like Lace came into this season with some kind of injury. She didn't participate in a single televised match of Joust, Conquer, or Hang Tough. No other Gladiator posted 0 appearances in more than one event for the entire season. She does hold the most female appearances in Powerball and Assault, while also doing more than her fair share of Atmospheres, but in all of those, she was kind of terrible. Actually, to be fair, she's not that bad at Assault, but the women tend to be very good at that event, at least in Season 2. She posted a 64% win rate in that event, which sounds great until you realize that Gold, Ice, and Diamond are all above 80%. Now, it's important to note that both Powerball and Atmosphere are a bit hard to score because American Gladiators doubles the points for only those events when we get to the semifinals. For the most part, the Gladiators all participate in a roughly equal amount of those matches, outside of one Gladiator we'll get to much later, so I don't weigh this too much. That said, knowing that Lace did more Powerballs than any other woman is important because it means she's viewed as one of the better players even if the numbers don't bear that out. Of course, these are also team events, so Lace could dominate every time out and be led down by her teammates, which means I weigh them a little less in the rankings. All of that said, Lace's best event might actually be the wall. She was only successful in 50% of her attempts, but that's better than anyone else besides Blaze and Diamond, including the boys. She also tends to actually pull her opponent off the wall instead of just having them drop on their own. Unfortunately, that doesn't help push her above any of the other women on the list. Number 4, Gold. I think this spot is very close between Gold and Diamond, but I'm gonna give Diamond the edge because she's not the worst performer in anything. Gold, meanwhile, is the worst performing lady in Powerball, The Wall, and Atmosphere. The Wall is particularly bad because the ladies are usually much better than men, but she actually ties Thunder as the worst Gladiator in the event during Season 2. On the other hand, Gold is the best performing Gladiator regardless of gender at Assault. She won 87.5% of her matches, an absolutely ridiculous rate of success. On top of that, she's the only woman to post a win rate above 50% in both Breakthrough and Conquer, and is the best woman at Human Cannibal. That said, I think her weaknesses stand out just a little too much. Her game just isn't as well-rounded as the other Gladiators above her. Number 3, Diamond. As mentioned, Diamond and Gold are nearly tied in these rankings. Diamond just doesn't have as many holes in her game as Gold, though they are there. In fact, the only thing keeping her from being the worst Lady Gladiator in Conquer is the fact that Lace never did it, because Diamond failed in her 2 attempts. That said, she was the only woman to post a winning percentage over 35% in Hang Tough, kept a low score in Powerball and Atmosphere while participating in double-digit events in both, and was pretty solid in every other event except one. That event is Joust, where she is the worst performing Gladiator outside of Gold who didn't have a Joust all season. You might think this isn't a huge issue, but she did the most Jousts of any woman all season, meaning you'd think she was the go-to for that event. However, in her 12 events, she only picked up 4 victories. For comparison, Blaze won 4 matches in just 8 attempts. Simply not good enough for someone that's being billed as the on-site leader at that event. Number 2, Blaze. Here's the thing about Blaze. She is basically gold, but much better. Like gold, she isn't great across the board, but excels at events like Powerball and the Wall. In fact, she's downright dominant at the Wall, posting a ludicrous 70% win rate. Only one other player, regardless of gender, is above 50%. She also participated in 14 Powerballs, so you can't say her great numbers are because she skipped the rounds in the later stage of the competition where the points were doubled. Blaze does have a couple knocks though. She's the only female gladiator that was DQ'd all season, getting knocked out twice in Powerball. Blaze is also pretty bad at assault, barely scraping together a 50% win rate. On top of that, she doesn't have a single successful attempt at human cannonball despite her 6 attempts. That said, her prowess on the Wall, solid win rate at Joust, and overall above average showing in most events puts her in a tier just above Diamond and Gold. Number 1, Ice. I'll be honest, I went into this expecting Ice to be the best, and I was not disappointed. She doesn't place last in any event for the ladies all season, coming out as the statistically best player in Joust, Atmosphere, and Conquer. In fact, the only event where she finishes out of the top 2 in terms of winning percentage is the Wall, where she's in 4th place due to her 30% win rate. It gets even better though. Unlike many players this season, Ice doesn't really have an event the producers try to force her into. She is the ultimate utility player for the female gladiators, posting solid numbers in every event outside of Breakthrough. And even that can be explained away because the woman is nearly unbeatable at Conquer, going 6 for 8 this season. She also works well within the team, posting great scores in both Powerball and Atmosphere, but her best event is probably Joust. You can tell that many of the other gladiators are a bit timid when they get into Joust, almost looking like they don't really know how to play. Not Ice. From the jump, she is absolutely destroying competitors with a smile on her face. Ice is the star of the show for a reason, and she more than proves it in her first season. Now, let's take a look at where the 5 men stack up against each other. Number 5, Thunder. Here's the thing about the men's side during Season 2. I don't think there's a true weak link in the mix, and would entertain an argument for most of these guys to move around. That said, Thunder definitely seems like more of a specialist than any of the other male gladiators. Yes, he has a great winning percentage in events like Joust, Conquer, and Assault, but he also doesn't do them very often. And in events like the Wall and Atmosphere, he plays quite a bit, but just isn't very good. Of course, it's not all bad for Thunder. The man is a dynamo at human cannonball, which makes sense when you look at him. I can't find the actual weights of the gladiators, but Thunder has to be the heaviest of them. Him being an immovable object isn't really a surprise. I also have to talk about his performance in Powerball. Unlike Turbo, he actually did participate in several semi and quarterfinal matchups and still posted better per game stats than everyone but Turbo. I'm ranking him low, but if he's able to play in more events in Season 3, he could move up the rankings very quickly. Number 4, Laser. I think this ranking is going to surprise some people, especially if you've just watched the Netflix doc. After all, Laser was one of the few faces of the show and is one of the few gladiators that stuck around for every single season. And to be fair, I think you could rank him as high as 2nd, and I wouldn't be that mad. However, Laser just doesn't perform that well at several of the most important events. For example, he was the worst male in Joust this season, posting a relatively paltry 60% win rate. You can argue that he did more of that event than anyone but Gemini, but both Turbo and Thunder have only 1 less win than him despite climbing onto the platform 4 fewer times. Next, let's look at the Wall, which is supposedly, if you believe the announcers, Laser's best event. He's supposed to dominate this, and yet he only wins 3 times in 12 attempts. That's borderline embarrassing, especially when a bigger dude like Gemini was able to win 4 of his 8 attempts. I also have to point out that he's the only male with multiple DQs on the season, getting tossed into both Powerball and Hang Tough. There are all kinds of bright spots for Laser though. He is almost without question the best male at Assault. While Nitro gets significantly more attempts at the event, Laser actually has more wins. He's also a workhorse at Conquer, even if he only has a 38% winning percentage. That event might be the most tilted against the Gladiators though, so I rate him pretty highly despite the relatively poor percentages. All in all, Laser had a solid season with flashes of brilliance, but his lack of wins at what is supposed to be his marquee event knocks him down my rankings. Number 3, Gemini. Alright, let's start with the negatives first. Gemini has 3 events where he's the lowest performing male gladiator by percentage. Those events are Powerball, Human Cannonball, and Atmosphere. He actually ranks 3rd or lower in every event except the Wall, where he's 1st in winning percentage, and Conquer and Hang Tough, where he's in the 2nd spot. That all sounds bad, and you might want to move him to the bottom slot because of it. After all, Thunder actually places first in 3 different events and is only at the bottom in Hang Tough. However, it's important to dig a little deeper. Yes, Gemini's Powerball numbers aren't great, but he did it 15 times, which is only bettered by Nitro on the men's side. He also has the most plays in Atmosphere among the men, making him the go-to guy in team events. So while his numbers don't look great in those events, he passes the eye test. I hate to say, trust me bro, but unless you're going to watch every episode like I did, you're gonna have to. On top of that, he's the male workhorse in Joust, and unlike Diamond on the women's side, he actually backs that up by winning 9 of his 12 matches. That blows everybody else out of the water. Gemini also surprisingly performs very well on the wall, which seems like an event he'd be bad at given his size. However, he uses that size to slam the wall and knock competitors off. While he hardly ever pulls anyone down, he wins the mental game and is tied for most wins in the event among men. His numbers might not be sexy, but he does the grunt work and is the de facto locker room leader, making him a very important Season 2 Gladiator. Number 2, Nitro. It's safe to say that Nitro is one of the most well-known gladiators, and it turns out that that reputation comes with very good reason. Now look, like Gemini, Nitro's winning percentage rankings are all over the place. The man looks borderline mediocre if you're just looking at where he ranks compared to other gladiators. However, he is the go-to guy for almost every event. Seriously, Nitro did 20 Powerballs. 20! Turbo did 8. And the next closest male is Gemini at 15. He also did 10 Atmospheres, which is only bested by Gemini with 11. It keeps going too. He's tied with Turbo for the most attempts on Assault. He's just below Laser in the wall, and only Turbo did Hang Tough more. Sure, he might not win all the time, but we have to give him credit for being more involved than literally anyone else in the season besides Larry Zonka. He also backs it up with good numbers in Joust, the Wall, Breakthrough, and Hang Tough. Nitro doesn't perform super well at any particular event, but he is the ultimate glue guy for Season 2, which is why I rank him so highly. That, and the fact that he's the only male with an actual personality. Number 1, Turbo. If you would have told me I would have Turbo at the top of my male rankings at the end of Season 2, I would have asked, who's Turbo? In my memory of watching the show in syndication, Turbo was the one I remembered the least, but I came away incredibly impressed at what the man did in Season 2. There is only one event, Assault, where he finished below second in terms of winning percentage. That's dominance. That's godlike. That's a true American Gladiator. Now, I have to be honest, some of those percentages are a bit misleading. For instance, his per game numbers in Powerball are great, but he never did an event in the semis or quarters. That sways his numbers massively, making him look much better in that event than he really was. He also doesn't have many attempts in either Breakthrough or Conquer, so while he did very well in his limited time, it's hard to rank him above Gemini or Laser, who both got stuck into those events much more often. That said, the events he did play often are ridiculous. The man went 9 for 12 in Hang Tough. Keep in mind, he weighs over 250 pounds, and yet he's able to destroy much lighter competitors at an event that's all about body control, grip strength, and strategy. He's not just a physical specimen though, as he also won 9 of his 14 attempts in Assault. For reference, Nitro also had 14 attempts, but only won 5 times. Come on! If you want to argue someone else above him, I'll hear it, but I think you're wrong. Yes, the men's field is a bit more wide open than the women's, where Ice was an absolute wrecking crew, but I think Turbo's performance in key events overtakes the fact that he was never asked to perform in team events during the latter stages of the tournament. So those are my rankings. Be sure to sound off in the comments to tell me why I'm wrong, and if you have the hookup on Season 1, outside of Roku having like 5 episodes, please let me know. See you in a few weeks with Season 3.